Alright, audio check, audio check. Audio check, audio check. Alright, seems like things are working. Welcome back, folks. I'm Phil Gallagher. I'll be playing some Red, White, Death, and Taxes again. This is going to be our third league of today. I failed out of the first one, unfortunately, and went 3-2 in the second one, and we're gonna give this one more try with our Red-White build. Let's see. Currently, we are sitting at a record of 61 and 36 with this build. That's about 63%, which is okay. We lost a couple of percentage points earlier today, but we'll see how we can do this time around. Sort of before I get started with today's stream, and I'll probably mention this a couple of times, I just wanted to thank Mark Wheat for his donation of $20 towards the efforts of the stream and ThrabenU University. Mark, I really appreciate that, so if you end up watching this video or you end up watching the stream, thank you very much for that. I do appreciate it. Without further ado, I'm just gonna kind of jump right into the queue and get playing right away. So while I'm waiting to find an opponent here, it looks like it was a... Never mind. I'll have that conversation a little bit later. Alright, we have won the die roll. We're playing against J. Robbins, 55. And I don't have any data on this player. This hand doesn't really do anything anytime soon. Nevertheless, it has an Ether Vial, which is the best card in the deck. It has a Recruiter, and on turn 3 we can Recruiter for a 2-drop play that we can put in. And then on turn 3, we can Flicker Wisp the Recruiter and do something else with it. The hand is a little weak. It's really going to depend on what our opponent is playing, whether or not this hand actually ends up being anything of note. But with any relevant draw, and by relevant draw I mean Port, Wasteland, or any 2-drop, this hand becomes very insane, so I'm going to go ahead and keep. This is a slightly questionable keep. Auto Mull on the draw, 100%. Auto Mull on the draw, agreed. On the play, questionable, but maybe good enough. So if this hand ends up being... we're playing the mirror. Our opponent is going to get an unchecked Mom for a little while, but as long as they don't have like a Stoneforge as a follow-up, then next turn we can Recruiter for our own Stoneforge and try to get ahead in that fashion. opponent does have the Stone Forge. That is unfortunate. They got a Batter Skull. That is interesting. That might mean the opponent is inexperienced in the mirror, or it could mean that they already have the Jitte in hand. Natural draw on Stoneforge is pretty great here. So I can Recruiter for my own Revoker to revoke either a mom or a piece of equipment, put in my Stoneforge, get my Jitte, and then try to take this game over with some combination of my own equipment and Palace Jailer. Since I'm going to expose a Caracas to Wasteland anyway, I'm going to go ahead and fetch a Plateau here. And we'll get a Revoker. If my opponent ends up having a Jitte, this Revoker will be great on that. Otherwise, the Revoker can go on Mom. Alright, there's that Batter Skull. I'll go ahead and get Jitte. So this is a moment where I might want to tick up to activate my Vial, put in the Revoker, revoke Mother of Runes, and then tick up the Vial to 3 so that next turn I can tick up to 4 and start getting this Palace Jailer and Flicker Wisp action going. So we shut off the opposing Mother of Runes. We'll then tick up our Aether Vial. We draw another piece of equipment, which is pretty solid. Yeah, Flickering the Germ is something I might do long term. We'll see what my opponent has this turn, because that can really change what I want to be doing. Let's get this Jitte out here. I don't think I'm going to tick up the vial yet this turn since I have this Flicker Wisp. I can put in another piece of equipment here, but if I do so, I don't give myself a chance to equip Jitte this turn. But if I rip a land, I can equip Jitte, Flicker Wisp the Germ, attack in with a creature equipped with Jitte, and really take over this game. So I'm just going to let the tapping happen. Does that change my mind about what I want to do in this scenario? No, I don't think so. I'll leave it on 3 for a turn. But I'm almost certain to tick it up the next turn. Alright, there's a land. I'll get a plateau. Alright, my opponent scoops to me getting an active Jitte, essentially. If my opponent had just searched up a Jitte this game, it's very likely that they would have gotten underneath my relatively slow hand. But they got the Batter Skull instead, which might have cost them the game. Obviously, I don't know the rest of their hand, so I can't say for sure. But I feel pretty confident that if my opponent just got a Jitte, they would have been in better shape than they were in the rest of that game. Game 1, we win the equipment war. And I'm going to just note, opponent probably fetched wrong. Alright, let's move to the sideboard. So the red-white deck in this matchup sort of takes on the role of the control deck, because I get a ton of removal to bring in. Like if you look at this, this is effectively 6 removal spells that I'm bringing in. So I start by boarding out the Rest in Peace that does nothing, my Thalias that are relatively weak, and then from there I have to make 2 more cuts, and I choose Magus of the Moon. While my opponent has probably 6 to 9 more basic lands than I do in their deck, so the Magus of the Moon is more likely to hurt me than it is to hurt them. So now we have a bunch more removal. We have 1 more just sort of generically good creature with First Strike, and we're pretty well suited to attack the opponent's creatures. We're a little lighter on ways to remove equipment than the mono white version, but since we can take so many bodies off of the battlefield, that doesn't necessarily matter. Yeah, so Moxall, I just saw your comment. I am also very puzzled why they didn't find Jitte. Like, I don't know what that says about the rest of their hand, but I'm guessing my opponent is just inexperienced. Alright, my opponent has mulliganed. I have an Ether Vial hand that also has a Swords to Plowshares, so I have a good turn 1 play if my opponent has Mom, or if my opponent doesn't have Mom, so I'll be keeping this hand. although we will be fetching a basic plains just 100% with this hand. Oh geez, my opponent mulliganed to 5 on the play. That is not a recipe for success. I'm actually going to play this port out before my fetch land. Yeah, there are a lot of different theories on how to sideboard for the mirror. Like, there was a little while where I tried siding out Aether Vials for the mirror to board in Containment Priest and other relevant cards. That was something I tried on the draw in particular. With some older builds that like included a bunch of pithing needles and stuff like that, it was possible that was correct, but with the modern builds, I just can't get behind boarding out like Vials. I'm no expert at the deck, but I've had people board out things like Revokers against me. Revoker's an amazing card in the mirror, like one of the best cards. It shuts off equipment, it shuts off Mom, it shuts off Vial. I think that's dangerous. Oh man, our opponent's hand is bad. No turn 2 play on a mold of 5. That is rough. That actually means that I will probably just opt to port my opponent rather than do anything else and just sort of ride. Oh. So now that I have this Stoneforge Mystic, that actually might change my line. Like I can just port my opponent off that Caracas and they probably can't do anything, and I will just buy time in that regard, and I can vial in the Stoneforge and either cast Jitte and hold up swords or just pass again. But if I just Stoneforge and get Jitte here, it will force them to make the first move, but if they do something like drop a Crusader, that might temporarily set me back. I'm just gonna pass and port my opponent. I wouldn't blame anyone for just jamming the Stoneforge here. Containment Priest is fine. P&K looks insane in the mirror. It is. All right, my opponent has just scooped it up. They whiffed on land there. They have nothing to do. They conceded. That seems like a really early concession. Like they're technically ahead on board, but maybe the rest of their hand was just absolutely garbage. I don't really know. All right, so we're on the draw. We win. I'm just gonna say game 2 opponent concedes very early after mold of 5. So let's talk about P&K in the mirror. Let me pull up the deck list to do this actually. So if we kind of look at most of the creatures in Death and Taxes, post board, if you're pulling out these Thalias, a lot of your creatures are very small, And so Pia and Kira can machine gun them down. It creates 3 bodies with 1 card, allowing you to chump block when you're behind. With Caracas, it's recurable, and unlike Thalia, which is a legendary creature that can be bounced, you get value when this enters the battlefield. So if your opponent bounces it with their Caracas, you paid 4 mana for 2 Thopters. Those are colorless creatures that can sort of mess with Mother of Runes, which otherwise often takes over the mirror. So Pia and Kirin is great on a number of levels. The mono-white version, let's just look at my Crusader version, for example, takes the approach to the mirror where you're trying to win with permanence. So you take Sword of War and Peace and you try to ride that to victory. Or you Council's Judgment away your opponent's best permanence. So you're trying to fight the permanent game, whereas the red version tends to fight the removal game. And the mono-white version has these Gideons, which often come in the mirror for similar reasons, to try to fight the permanent, to try to fight the game on the battlefield. Hey, Bahra, nice to see you. Usually I'm popping in on your stream. Now that I've got this set up, it's the other way around. So I am playing red-white taxes. I'm playing the build that we talked about previously. My record with it currently has gone down a bit from the last time we talked. I'm sitting at 63% win percentage after 98 games, which is still really good, but I was closer to 70 last time we chatted. All right, so we just won the mirror. The opponent conceded probably too early in both of their games and fetched equipment wrong in game 1. We ended up 3-2 in the last league. We started out on a rough streak, and then we won out. Alright, we have won another die roll. We are playing against Salty Mercy. Our hand looks pretty sweet. I'll see if we have any data on Salty Mercy. We do not have any data on Salty Mercy. We will be keeping this hand, more or less, unless my opponent was playing something like Ant, we'd be absolutely keeping this hand blind. It's very strong. Like, we have a turn 1 removal spell for an opposing creature. We have a Wasteland as a follow-up, we have a Stoneforge as a follow-up, and Recruiter for whatever we actually need for this matchup. I was considering streaming right now, but I don't know now. Yeah, the D&T streams don't necessarily need to compete with each other. Alright, it's an Eldrazi Mimic. This is our 4th time today playing against an Eldrazi deck of some nature. Yeah, that last round against Nick Fit was real weird. So against the Eldrazi decks, you really want to try to make them stumble in the early game and keep them off of their mana. I could just deploy a Stoneforge right there, but if my opponent has another Soul Land and just does something like Thought Knot Sears me, I'm set back a huge, huge amount. How often do I stream at the moment? Today, I randomly got the day off of work, so I've streamed 3 leagues today. But more generally, I will probably be streaming 3 or 4 times a week on weeknights. Probably about 7 o'clock or so Eastern time. I imagine you're in a different enough time zone where most of the time we won't overlap. So I end up playing Moto 3 to 4 times a week, and so like if I'm playing, I intend on just streaming. Hey, San Francisco, that's like a 3 hour time difference, so I guess you're just getting off of school or work. Hopefully you enjoy this. See what my opponent is doing. An endless 1 for 3 is not better than a batter skull. I'm just going to dump this batter skull into play on my opponent's turn. Another line is just go ahead and recruiter for Palace Jailer, get Palace Jailer, and start trying to ride that to victory. But I think that will be my long-term plan rather than my short-term plan. With the red-white build, Nurse Toki, this matchup actually is pretty favorable. Having Magus of the Moon to just shut down everything that my opponent can possibly do is really strong. And that's another thing that our Recruiter of the Guard can go and get us. It is good to know that our opponent has Caracas in their deck. The Eldrazi decks don't always run them. It's one of the potential flex slots. Ooh, I think we're going to see a Reality Smasher here. That is indeed a Reality Smasher. So what's kind of interesting is, yes, the opponent gets to attack in for 5, but that doesn't actually matter that much because we're going to crack them back for 4 with the Batter Skull and gain back 4 of that 5 life. Is it good against 4-color control? It's pretty even. Let me pull up my data either in between rounds or after this match. My matches have been pretty close on that front. So I can second Stoneforge, go get Jitte, and put Batterskull on Jitte on the following turn, or I can Recruiter, get something neat, and play that. I'll just start with the Batterskull attack while I think, because that's something I'm going to do no matter what. If my opponent has another Reality Smasher, that's not so great for me. I think I can just kind of play the mono-white game this time, and that will probably be good enough. I can get Jitte or Sword of Fire and Ice here, and both will be extremely good. I don't want to necessarily Recruiter of the Guard for Palace Jailer in the face of Reality Smasher, because like there's the possibility that that will just trample over, or the animated Mishra's Factory will deal me in as well. And just to be bigger than the Reality Smasher, I'm going to get Sword of Fire and Ice, even though Jitte is a better card in this matchup. Like, if my opponent ends up wanting to trade, like, a Reality Smasher for a Batterskull wielding a Sword of Fire and Ice, then I will be able to either bounce and redeploy the Batterskull, or just shift it over to a Stoneforge and start attacking again. So while my opponent is thinking, let me look at my numbers for the 4-color control matchup. Matchup looks to be pretty even based on my data that I have here. Hello. This is an automated call from my work. And they hung up on me. They'll call back. I don't want to trade Stoneforge and Germ for the Reality Smasher when I'm about to make the Germ bigger than a Reality Smasher. Yeah, I think it is very winnable. Sometimes the matchup just goes absolutely terribly wrong, like when your opponent has like Liliana of the Last Hope and Jace, or like Culligan's Command, Snapcaster, Culligan's Command, that sort of stuff. So I'm going to play out this Wasteland pre-combat in case my opponent tries to animate the Mishra's Factory and double block with Endless One and Mishra's Factory on the Batterskull that is equipped with this piece of equipment here. Just something to be aware of that can happen. Ooh, does my opponent have another Dismember? My opponent does have another Dismember. Look at that. Okay. Okay, so now I can Recruiter for one of my Haymaker cards and play a Haymaker card next turn, like, say, a Palace Jailer, or I can just put a sword on Stoneforge Mystic and attack in, but if I put a sword on Stoneforge Mystic and attack in, I sort of open myself to taking a lot of damage on the Crackback. I'm okay with getting hit by the Reality Smasher, but I don't just want to get hit by a big Endless One, so I can either put an equipment on the Stoneforge and pass, which is fine, or just Recruiter for something. I think this is a spot where we could go ahead and Recruiter for a Palace Jailer, and it would probably be pretty good. Like, we can Palace Jailer the Reality Smasher. But I think I just want to just buy time here. We're going to equip the Stoneforge so that the Endless One can attack in. We are going to Wasteland my opponent and plan on equipping the Batterskull to this Stoneforge next turn and riding that out for the rest of the game. Yeah, so this forces my opponent to activate the Mishra's Factory so that they don't go into just chump block mode. So my opponent has a bunch of Dismembers in their deck, but that is a very real cost between Ancient Tomb and Dismember. Even though I've hardly touched my opponent, they're almost dead. I'm at a very healthy 14 life. My opponent's in bad shape. If I draw another land, I would like to not show my opponent the Windswept Heath so they don't know about the Red Splash. What does iPronto say? iPronto says, recruit for Flicker Wisp, flick the Endless One next turn, and swing in the air freely after that. Maybe that's too slow, though. Like, there's nothing wrong with that line. This recruiter's just a little bit slow. Like, it feels slow. I've had plenty of opportunities to cast it, but I didn't want to because I have all of these equipments as mana sinks. Ooh. Jitte is okay. So I'm not gonna do any blocks here. I'll just take 5. My opponent can get 2 Jitte counters, and then I can Batterskull, equip, and just not have to deal with it, really. Or alternatively, Recruiter for Revoker, and revoke it if it becomes a problem a turn down the line. Yeah, okay, so since we drew that Rashadan port, we will go ahead and just equip the Batterskull to this Stoneforge. We will then end up with a 7/8 monster that, although it can't necessarily attack through the Reality Smasher right now, it's solid. Our opponent is also obligated to chump block the big one, so we can also push a point of damage with the Stoneforge Mystic. Just to check real quick, my opponent can go up to 6 life if they just gain 2 life with Jitte, so there's no reason to try to equip this Stoneforge here to force my opponent to lose those counters. So my opponent has to jump with the Endless one here. And now they might not even be able to attack in with the Reality Smasher on their turn. If I just go and attack in with the other Stoneforge, it forces my opponent to use these 2 Jitte counters. That's something I could have done as well to push 1 point of damage. My opponent would have used the 2 Jitte counters on here. So my opponent can pump this up to a 5, 6, 7, 8, a 9, 9, so blocking isn't profitable. We won't block. So my opponent has the opportunity to gain up to 8 life, so the Stoneforge is still lethal. Current plan for our turn is to Recruiter of the Guard for Phyrexian Revoker, revoke the Jitte. My opponent will gain a bunch of life in response. If my opponent plays something that... Oh, my opponent has conceded. Alright, so we're playing red-white. Playing red-white Death and Taxes. We're playing against regular Eldrazi. We're on the play or draw that time. I think we were on the play. We are on the play. And we win against Salty Mercy. Game 1 won with double equipment. Let's move to the sideboard. Yeah, we avoided showing the splash, which is good, because those Magus of the Moons are awesome. We're going to board in Path to Exile. We're going to board in Relic Order for things like Chalice and Jitte. We'll probably board in this Mirren Crusader, just as a generic body that can trade with a Thought-Knot Seer. And we're likely to board in the second P and K as well. We'll start by boarding out the Rest in Peace and boarding out the Mother of Runes, as those cards do absolutely nothing. And then we'll sort of make a trim from there. Thalia is kind of mediocre in this matchup. Like, it has 2 power, it has First Strike. Those are things that are relevant against early... sorry, blanking on the name. The 2/1 2-mana Eldrazi. Eldrazi Mimic, it's relevant there and can be relevant against the Matter Reshapers as well. But it's not the best card in the matchup. Otherwise, I like more or less everything we have. Some people earlier suggested that boarding in Cataclysm is good enough in the regular Eldrazi matchup. I'm not particularly fond of that line. Cunning Spark Mage is something to consider with all of the first strike creatures I have. You know, when you have something like a Mirran Crusader, if you have a Cunning Spark Mage as well, you can use that to trade with a Reality Smasher. But it's not necessarily good enough on its own. Yeah, in the mono-white build, I like Gideon over Cataclysm. This hand has a Swords to Plowshares, so we're going to keep it. I mean, the problem with Cataclysm in the regular Eldrazi matchup is that your opponent can just get down one big creature that you can't deal with. Alright, there's an Eldrazi Mimic. I'm going to go ahead and play out a fetch land on turn 1. Yeah, it will deal us 1 damage, but we're going to want to fetch a basic plains at some point in case we draw Magus of the Moon. And I'm not going to Swords the Eldrazi Mimic right now, because if my opponent has another creature, they will play it prior to combat to make Eldrazi Mimic bigger. A Ratchet Bomb. You bet. There is some argument for holding this Plow, since playing a Thalia next turn can stonewall the Mimic, but I would rather play Revoker on Ratchet Bomb on my next turn, so I'm going to go ahead and just Plow this now. Or I can Stoneforge. Stoneforge isn't great against Thought-Knot. I can also just port my opponent, but if I port them and just kind of let them tick up the Ratchet Bomb and clock me with Mishra's Factory, that's not the best position. So I actually think I'm going to play the Stoneforge to bait a Dismember on it, and the Ratchet Bomb will tick up, my opponent will kind of think they're safe on that front, and then I can get it with Revoker. Although if they have a Thought-Knot Seer, that's sort of awkward. Most of my lines are of approximately the same power level here. And to play around Ratchet Bomb actually getting to get cracked on 2, I'm going to get Sword of Fire and Ice, even though it is the worst equipment in this matchup. Like, if my opponent doesn't have it and they later have a removal spell for this Revoker, it's going to be super awkward for me. But I can just hold the equipment, actually. Yeah, I'll still get Jitte. I talked myself out of it. Never mind. Is it a Thought-Knot Seer or a Reality Smasher? Oh, it's just an endless one. That's okay. In the face of a big endless one, I'm just going to Recruiter of the Guard for a Flicker Wisp. I could get Palace Jailer here as well. Palace Jailer would be a higher upside card, but if my opponent has another creature, then that other creature plus Factory might steal the crown from me, especially given this Ratchet Bomb. That seems like a really aggressive use of a Ratchet Bomb. Like, that really surprises me that my opponent would use the Ratchet Bomb for the Stoneforge, knowing I still have that Jitte in hand. We'll see if the rest of their turn makes that play make more sense. All right, they're gonna get to clock me for 10 here. There is a question of whether or not I want to just jump block with this Recruiter of the Guard to effectively gain 5 life, and that might be a fine use of this body, in all honesty. If my opponent doesn't have another creature on the following turn, then it also blocks the Mimic. But this 5 life is better than 2.5 Mimic hits, so I will go ahead and take the jump here. Okay, a Swords to Plowshares is a great draw. We now have double removal spell for my opponent's stuff. Let's see if my opponent wants to turn their Eldrazi Mimic into a 0/0. Oh, they didn't. Rats. Almost got him. He knew the tech. So we're going to be swordsing this Reality Smasher, and the question is, what are we going to discard? Ooh, my opponent has a basic Wastes in their deck. Interesting. I think I'm going to discard the Revoker. Since I don't have a good target for it right now, I'd be sort of guessing in the dark with it. This Thalia can brickwall both of the remaining threats here, if Jitte somehow... I don't know if I just failed to successfully discard this Revoker to the Swords to Plowshares due to a Moto bug. That's really frustrating. Oh, nope. It worked. What happened? So I didn't actually discard a card, but it got exiled. Moto, quality program, ladies and gentlemen. 100% unsure what happened. Reality Smasher is bugged, you don't have to discard? Wow. That's a feel-bad moment, folks. Oh. I am so... I legitimately feel bad for my opponent. Yeah... I get to eat both of my opponent's mimics here with this Jitte trigger. This is disgusting. Alright, well, we win that one. We didn't even have to discard that card. Poor opponent. Alright, so on the draw, we win. Alright. So, why did we win that one? We had Jitte, and we got to Flicker Wisp, a large endless one. Alright, we are 2-0 so far in this league. So far we have beat D&T and Eldrazi. Moxall, Navi Stabber was running my 74 of my 75, I believe. I think he said he switched out the main deck Rest in Peace for Flicker Wisp number 4. Mr. Rocket, I did not chat with my opponent about the bug. They didn't say anything. They've probably been on the wrong side of that bug many times at this point. Alright, we're playing against Learn to Love 6. I've played against this opponent before. They are on Delver decks of various natures. Do I like this hand against Delver? This has an Ether Vial and a Stoneforge, which means that it is probably good enough for a keep. If my opponent doesn't do something like a Deathrite Shaman, I will probably just slam this Wasteland on turn 1. Alright, my opponent has switch decks. They are on Miracles. So, Moxall, have you read my article that I had Chris Cunningham write about the math of splashing? That would be the absolute best place to look, because in that article is the math associated with those decisions. I would look that out again. So this turn we're going to try to jam the second Ether Vial to see if we can just get this to resolve. My opponent cast Portent on themselves, and it's very likely that there is a 2-drop on top of their library right now. Negator 77, the Miracles players say that they are very, very, very favored. And people like White Faces have probably played the matchup more than I have. He's a very prominent Miracles player. And if he says it is very favorable for them, I believe that. I haven't played the matchup enough to really and truly comment on the nature of it. I think I've maybe played against it 5 or 6 times in recent memory. I'm going to be fine with just porting my opponent here. Port them and then deploy 2 meaningful cards. Yeah, Search for Escanta is an insane card in this matchup. It is absolutely stupid how good that card is. So Negator 77, it kind of went through this weird period where right after Top got banned, Miracles was unplayable, and then D&T was really good against the first couple of iterations of this deck, and then they started main decking things like Search for Iscanta, as well as Supreme Verdict and Engineered Explosives, and things became difficult. All right. I'm going to go ahead and play out this Flooded Strand and get a basic Plains, in case we end up using a Magus of the Moon at some point. I'm just going to continue to port my opponent. Right now, we're safe from most things that aren't Terminus. So we'll tap down their Plains so they can't do a draw step Terminus. Alright, predict targeting me. You bet. And Recruiter of the Guard. Ooh, it's a Terminus. Vervandi, if you're interested in that deck, just message Lincoln about it. He loves that deck. He would be very happy to talk to you about it. So for the time being, we're going to say always no to both of these vials. We might end up ticking up one of them later. I don't want to play the Batterskull directly into the card Counterspell, which I haven't given my opponent a chance to cast this game yet. So I'm going to go ahead and take them off their Tundra. And we'll just continue porting them. If Lincoln's sight went down, it's probably just because he's working on the top decked app. Hey, Lingmeister, nice to see you. Do you have a different name on Reddit that you don't mind sharing? Otherwise, just message me later. I'm trying to make connections about who's who here. Do I want to cast this Batterskull into Counterspell? I really don't. I really, really don't. I'd rather just wait to draw like a Stoneforge and then or a Recruiter, because I can Recruiter into Stoneforge and dump this Batterskull into play. Like, I'm giving my opponent time to set up, which is not what I want to do. But I think I am just literally throwing away a card if I deploy the Batterskull. Unexpectedly absent. Alright, so my opponent just wants me to redraw the Sword of Fire and Ice. Okay. Alright, so now I have to play this little mind game. Now that my opponent has done this, do they have... What do they have for the counterbalance? Do they have like a Force of Will on top? Or do they have a 3-drop like, say, Vendilion Click or Council's Judgment? Given this play from my opponent, I am going to play one of these two cards this turn. Disgruntled Elk, we are talking about Lincoln Baxter's, I guess you'd call it Bug Depths deck. It's a weird one. I'm going to name... Elemental with this second Cavern. Or no, I'm going to name Artificer. There's a possibility that I might end up ticking vials up to 3 and 4. We're going to give this Batterskull probably to an opposing counterspell. Wow, the Batterskull just resolved, folks. The Batterskull just resolved. After all of my playing around Counterspell, it resolved. This could mean... Ooh. Ooh. 3 angels. Let's try to get one, folks. Opponent did not reveal. Well, it's not like I'm not going to cast the sword. My opponent should have a 3-drop on top of their deck if they have planned things out properly. But I'm sort of questioning some of my opponent's lines so far. Alright, everything just works. Oh, opponent, you're gonna be a little sad you did that now that I played this mom. Hey chat, have you ever put a Batter Skull in a Mother of Runes before? Do you know how sweet that is? Yeah, Ayati, that's fair. That's a very reasonable thing that my opponent can have. Like they can have a brainstorm to try to counter whatever I do. They can have a Swords to Plowshares there. So this is weird. My opponent didn't just auto Snapcaster Mage for Swords to Plowshares. Okay, there we go. Alright, we need like any creature here. Like any literal any creature is really good. That is not so good. 2, 4, 6, 7. So I need 8 to bounce Batter Skull and redeploy. We're taking 4, 8, 10 the next turn from the opposing creatures. We're in bad shape because we've missed a lot on creatures. So we can still port my opponent twice, and we'll go ahead and port off white. Can port the opponent twice and still bounce. I'm not going to bother to stagger in between phases here. Yep. So my opponent gets to whack me for 10 this turn. And that puts me to 6, and even if I redeploy the Batter Skull and it resolves, I'm still dead in the air, unfortunately. I'm just gonna take my draw step to just make sure they didn't accidentally cast it for more than X is 0. Alright. That's sort of unfortunate. That one was pretty close. Alright, so we were playing against Learn to Love 6. Game 1, loss to Entreat. My opponent played very, very well with their Unexpectedly Absence. I do commend them on their use of that to just brick my draw steps. Having to redraw that sword twice was pretty rough. We didn't draw very many creatures that game, which is something we can't really afford to be doing. But, you know, so be it. I'm not mad about it or anything. All right, so we're going to start by boarding out our Swords to Plowshares. We'll board out the Rest in Peace. It's not particularly useful here, and Magus of the Moon is not at its best in this matchup. Yes, it can stop Search for Azcanta once it's flipped into whatever it's called, but otherwise my opponent has so many basics that it probably hurts me just as much as it hurts my opponent. So what that means is we're sort of short one card for the Miracles matchup. So we have a few choices. We can just keep in the Magus, even though it's not good. We could keep in a Rest in Peace to stop Snapcaster Mage and Search for Azcanta for flipping. Or we can board in an Aethersworn Canonist as another body. So Mad Matt, we could also keep some Plows. My sort of plan for this matchup as of right now is grind them out with this big stuff. And you don't really know whether or not your opponent is going to have Mentor. If my opponent doesn't have Mentor, then Swords to Plowshares is a really, really bad card. If my opponent decides to keep the counterbalances in for some reason, it's further rough. Like keeping one Swords to Plowshares in to hedge against Mentor is fine, but if you only keep one, are you going to have it at the right time? Probably not. Yeah, so there are some sideboard cards that they can have that might make it good. But I'm gonna take an extra body here. So versus game one, we're up a few bodies because we boarded out. We boarded out 5 non-creatures and only brought in 2 non-creatures, so we're plus 3 bodies. This one only has 1 land, so we're going to mulligan. This is not a good hand. This hand needs another land badly, but we're going to keep that. Yes, Prelate for Terminus is fantastic. Alright, there's another land. No play against turn 3 is not where we want to be at this deck, but I don't think we can afford to mulligan this hand. So my opponent led on Tundra and shuffled with the Ponder. Does that mean they're landlight? Or does that mean this is a wasteland bait and they're fine? I'll go for it. Yeah, so a lot of times when you win the new Miracles matchup, it's because your opponent stumbles on mana in the initial turns of the game. So, like, even if we, like, so for our next turn, we can draw a 2-drop, and that's great. We can draw a land, and that's great. That's most of our deck. Like, this works out very, very well for us. Even better would be if we drew a land next turn so that we could Wingmare on top of this. We will take a Vial as a draw. Yeah, like, I am not going to blame anyone for keeping in Swords to Plowshares in this matchup. I have gone off and on a lot about my feelings on Swords to Plowshares in this matchup, and it often shifts with what build I'm playing and how many sideboard slots I have. Alright. Vial's gone. Not that big of a deal. Alright. Against such a matchup, are we racing him? Do you mean like if my opponent plays a mentor, like can we race the mentor? Is that what you're asking? Ugh. So I can use this Caracas as a Lotus Petal to accelerate out one of these 3-drops. That's not great. I can try to save it as a Lotus Petal for this Cataclysm instead. Taking no action is very dangerous, though. Like, I'm giving my opponent a lot of time to set up, and if I just let them, like, Snapcaster Portent, Snapcaster Ponder, stick a Jace, randomly spike and entreat without doing anything, ugh. This is not good. I will sadly cast this Wingmare. Yeah, so with an asterisk, D&T is usually the aggro deck in this matchup. Miracles is more controlling most of the time. That is not always true, but we more frequently play the role of the aggressor. Alright, do I want to put a second creature onto this board? 2 points a turn is probably not enough. I'll deploy the Crusader. We can get really blown out by something like Brainstorm Indeterminus or Blind Terminus. Alright. Let's see. Okay, so they cast Portent. I played Wingmare. Then I cast Crusader. Okay, so they could have buried it a couple down with Portent. Ugh. Again, with this Caracas draw. I'm not going to redeploy the third Caracas intentionally. If my opponent deals with this Thalia with a removal spell, then that means that I may end up casting a Cataclysm using the Caracas as a Lotus Petal. It is possible that currently we are winning the race. Really depends on how much stuff they have. Alright. We'll just attack with the Flicker Wisp. If we attack with Thalia and our opponent has anything, the Monastery Mentor will try to eat it. Alright, there's a Terminus. So there's a Force Wheel gone. I'm not going to play the Caracas to protect the Thalia again. If my opponent kills this Thalia on their turn, I will jam Cataclysm and just eat all their lands. Oh, I can jam this Jailer. If my opponent ends up having removal spell plus Snapcaster Mage, is there already a removal spell in their graveyard? Yeah, if my opponent ends up having a Snapcaster Mage, that's a really bad play though, and it will lose me the game. So I'm just going to play this cat. Yes, one of the chat rules is don't let me get paired against elves. It's chat's fault if it happens. Alright, there's that Snapcaster Mage and removal spell that I just played around. Oh, so they're going for the Predict. Okay. We just keep playing the bounce game with this Thalia. So chat, I can cast this Cataclysm now, and if my opponent has Force or Counterspell, it gets countered. Or I can cast this Thalia now, thinking that the Thalia will then eat a Counterspell instead. Tricky. I'm gonna go for it. Yeah, jamming Cataclysm has really high upside. If my opponent counters this, then that means the Thalia sticks around, and I have this threat that I can still just keep bouncing. My opponent's pretty low on resources, so this Thalia is going to be a real bear. Yeah, the opponent had 2 cards, and they were cards, I think, that were just blind off of the Predict. Now that my opponent is low on gas, I might opt to Jailer their Snapcaster Mage instead of just playing this Thalia. I choose not to shuffle. Monastery Mentor. So if we cast this Palace Jailer and my opponent does not have an instant or sorcery, then we have dealt with this Monastery Mentor and this Snapcaster Mage. If my opponent has an instant or sorcery, we'll trade with the Snapcaster Mage, and my opponent will get their Mentor back. I can play this Thalia this turn, and then Jailer the following turn. But if my opponent has a bunch of cantrips, the Jailer does nothing after this turn. Yeah. I don't like Jailer in this matchup, but with the red build, I don't have anything else that I really want to put in over it. Like, I don't want another Canonist in over it. Oh, I just noticed I am down to 5 minutes on time. That's not good. Taking that into consideration, I am going to jam and probably lose here. Yep. Actually, if I don't block, I can force my opponent again to have a spell, or I take it back. No block is fine. Oh no, I spent too much time thinking and chatting with the stream. That's on me. So the reason I didn't play the Wasteland was to get my opponent to flip that. So now we can Wasteland it. So my opponent just have a Jace here. Okay. Drawing another Cataclysm would be okay. Otherwise, we're pretty dead here. If I were the opponent there, I probably would have just bounced the Thalia. Like, bounce the Thalia, get in for 9 damage, kill me on the following turn. Yeah, assuming he has something, I'm just dead, right? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yep. So if I wasn't so low on time, I would have played the Thalia first prior to the Palace Jailer, but I probably wouldn't have beaten my opponent anyway there. Like just the cards that they had, the Mentor and the Jace and the Search, lined up well against what I had after sort of a rough start to that game. So we were talking in the chat about this earlier, but for anyone who wasn't here for it, we were talking about the D&T Miracles matchup and how the Miracles players think that it's really good in their favor. You can sort of see why from pieces of that game. There's sort of less clunk in this deck than other versions of it. We're still 2-1 in this league, though. We're doing fine. So far, we beat D&T and Eldrazi and lost to Miracles. More Delver would be great. Bug Delver in particular would be really good. Oh, Learn to Love. Good games. Learn to Love 6 sent you a Facebook message, by the way. Respond when you get a chance if you don't mind. Absolutely, I will do that. I'm going to write myself a note. So Learn to Love. This is going to get uploaded to YouTube later, or you can check out the VOD later. So if you want to like look at the matchup from my side, you are welcome to do so. All right, we are playing against M. Darst. No info on our opponent. Our hand is great. It has an Ether Vial, and a Thalia, and a Mom, and a Stoneforge, and a Wasteland. This is pretty close to ideal. We are in the draw, but you can't have everything. Ah. The old Wasteland opener. So we're going to counter with our own Wasteland and play an Ether Vial. We're not going to get cute and like Wasteland or anything like that. So what is my opponent playing that leads on Wasteland and Ghost Quarter? Is it just a really bad lands draw? With no Mox Diamond or Colored Source? They did take a Moldus 6. I will get one chance to use this plateau if I play it. And I'm going to play it. So the question is, do I want to apply pressure, or do I just want to slap down the second Ether Vial? Budget D&T is also an option. So like wastelanding their wasteland is a play I can make. But what will that really accomplish at the end of the day? If they're a budget D&T deck, that's great. If they're lands and they later start loaming, that's fine. We might just want to like do the wasteland play purely to protect our plateau. That might be good enough. Like, it's not great, but I think I'll do it. I'd also guess loose keep from budget D&T. It's very possible. We'll see if my opponent Ghost Quarters their Wasteland in response. They do. Forest. So assuming my opponent doesn't go land Life from the Loam, we'll throw a Thalia down protected by Mom. Yeah, we're playing against lands. Super punished? Super punished for my line? Yep. Alright, so we can port our opponent off green so they can't loam again. But I sort of like just jamming the Thalia and then holding up either Revoker or Stoneforge Mystic. Like, I want to get aggressive with my opponent, and then hopefully jam a Rest in Peace or a Magus of the Moon to just shut the door on this matchup. So, like, our plateau is probably getting wastelanded this turn. If it doesn't, I'll be pretty happy. Our port. Sure. So I could leave both of these at 2 to put in both of these creatures, but I want to put one up to 3 to have the possibility of just jamming Magus if it happens. I can't explain with words the amount of dead we are if our opponent ends up getting a Tabernacle. Alright, Thicket, Waste, Ghost Quarter. Hey, we get to dump this Batterskull in play. That's more than I thought was going to happen this game. So actually, that's something I thought about, but we don't necessarily know that he has Molten Vortex in his deck. And if he gambles for something, wouldn't it be a Punishing Fire if he has both? Because Punishing Fire, he can very likely get back one way or another. I will keep extending into this board. I'm going to put this Stone Forge in. There is a chance that the best thing my opponent has is just Mishra's Factory animate to surprise one of these things as a blocker. There is a small chance that that is what my opponent has going on. Sure, we don't have Prelate in the main deck here. Our opponent doesn't know that, but they might play around it. Yep. All right, so they've got a gamble. Lingmeister, yes, I am going to do that. I haven't sat down to extract the statistics yet, but I have been making a note of when Magus is the game-winning card. So our opponent is likely to concede at this exact moment because they probably just gambled for Glacial Chasm and they discarded their Glacial Chasm. So that's it's rough luck for them when they have 7 cards in hand. 8 with the Glacial Chasm. That's pretty unlucky. And our opponent concedes there. So I do think our opponent probably could have won that game by playing differently. Like, if our opponent hadn't taken the time to play a tapped land and instead had just continued to Wasteland or Ghost Quarter me, I couldn't have gotten out of that very easily. Like, these vials would have done some work, but I never would have been able to Stoneforge in this Batterskull for a huge amount of extra pressure. I never would have been able to cast an additional thing. The opponent was probably very worried about the vials, but with the way my hand was working out there, it would have been pretty difficult to deal with what they had going on. All right, so we're going to bring in Rest in Peace, and Path to Exile, and Sanctum Prelate, and Cataclysm to start things off. All right, what are we going to board out? The red version has a lot more generically good cards in this matchup than the mono white version, so boarding out is a little bit trickier here. If our opponent doesn't show us Molten Vortex, then there is some possibility that it's correct to just ditch these Phyrexian Revokers. We can get rid of Thalia and play less of a choke you on mana game and play more of a just have the right cards for this matchup game. Keep Revoker and board and Relic Order. Oh, I missed the Relic Order. Yeah, that's true. You don't think I need the Cataclysm. But Rest in Peace and Cataclysm is so sweet. I need to sit down and think about what I want to do for this matchup. with the red-white deck. I haven't played it very much. I guess I can sort of continue trimming on the mana denial guys and maybe not go super crazy on the removal spells. I'm going to rethink this in between games. So this hand does nothing. Like, it has a path for a Merit Lodge and an Ether Vial, but I don't actually do anything to disrupt my opponent if they have like a Life from the Loam. I'd rather mulligan and try to find a Rest in Peace. Hey, Di, I don't really think it is. Like, I have a Vial, but I don't do anything else other than just like port my opponent. So now we have the question of, do we want to jam the Rest in Peace, or do we want to play the Stoneforge? The Tireless Tracker is a little bit problematic. If I play the Rest in Peace first and my opponent has a Punishing Fire for the Stoneforge, then I can go ahead and like just have a get one use out of that Punishing Fire. It doesn't snag anything here, which is a little unfortunate, but that's fine. Like, even just getting this Maze of Ith out of the yard so my opponent doesn't get it back later is a non-zero factor. It's also very possible that we will just Flicker Wisp this Mox Diamond to get rid of it. Or if the Tireless Tracker gets too big, we can Flicker Wisp that as well. Somewhat surprised my opponent didn't just Wasteland us. So I'm playing Stoneforge this turn to just sort of check the life loss that we're going to get from this tireless tracker. Alright, there goes the rest in peace. It's a shame that's a turn before we got the rest in peace Cataclysm combo. Yep. Yep. We'll see how bad this is. Yep. So I can put this Batterskull in, but I am just going to remove this Tireless Tracker while I still have the opportunity to do so freely. My opponent has already gotten a ton of value off of it, more than I would have liked. If I wait until his turn, I deny him 1 mana, but give him the opportunity to draw a clue and gain 1 more life. So this is going to get my opponent Loam, unfortunately. Alright, for the time being, we have taken our opponent off of green mana. So if that 1 card in their hand is Light from the Loam, they cannot actually cast it. And I think I'm perfectly content just porting my opponent. Let's just make sure they can't cast that Loam. That's more important than getting the Jete in play. Although I can try to dodge for 1 turn, and if I do successfully dodge for 1 turn on them drawing a green source, No, I still wouldn't equip and not port the following turn. I'm just going to wait until I draw one more land to do anything with this Jitte. Or more likely 2 lands. This is the slow, painful death that Death and Taxes has to offer. Yep. Alright, so my opponent gets to waste the port now. So they will get to loam on their next turn. So my opponent has Wasteland and Grow for the Punishing Fire back. That's not great for me. So I can play this Jitte out now. My opponent will get to do terrible things to me. Drop of honey. Yep. So this is a little bit of a grim spot, but it's not unwinnable. I do have the option of path to exiling my own Flicker Wisp here. But I don't think that's good enough. I think I'm just going to let the Drop of Honey get this. And then try to spike a land for Batterskull if my opponent doesn't waste me at all, but my opponent is probably going to waste me at least once here. They might even just, like, go for the Windswept Heath as well. Alright. They're going for the Tentacle Monster. They have the Dark Depths. We have a path to exile. Yep. 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 So at this point, it's really going to be a question of how patient is our opponent going to be versus how quickly they go for it. Alright, my opponent produces a Merit Lodge. They Life from the Loam. They will probably just go ahead and... Yep. So I can Cataclysm here, but if I do so, I'd leave myself with 1 Plains to my opponent's 1 land, a bunch of lands in hand, and Life from the Loam. So this Cataclysm doesn't actually do a lot in this position, which is unfortunate since I have 2 of them in hand. Yeah, that's fair. So for anyone not following the chat and just listening, Atai said just scoop to avoid timing out, and that's completely fair in this matchup. Like, I'm probably not getting through what they have there. Like, they're going to produce another Merit Lodge this turn that I have to deal with. Hey, Arc Lightning, welcome to the stream. So Atai says he doesn't like Cataclysm in this matchup. It was awkward that game because we didn't, like, our Rest in Peace got killed the turn before. Rest in Peace plus Cataclysm would have been sort of the game-ending bomb. If I board out the Cataclysms, I could bring in like 2 Thalias, which is not unreasonable. Pia Incurin is also something that could be boarded out in this matchup. It's going to be really hard to cast since it's 2 off-color manas that can be wastelanded. So if I do this, I could just go Thalia, Thalia, Thalia. So my opponent does indeed have Tireless Trackers, so I could also like sub out a Thalia for another Swords, depending on how many 1-drop removal spells I want to play. Yeah, I like cutting Jitte. Thalia is great. I love Thalia. Yeah, I think I like this. Yes, I do play Recruiters, and I do play Magus. It would be wonderful if they show up. And there's Recruiters, but no ability to cast them. This is fine. So we can't actually cast the Magus, but we have a turn 2 Rest in Peace with Port You for a little while follow-up. And hopefully Rest in Peace plus Magus is enough to win this game. This Thalia is acceptable. But I would really like to just draw a Plateau or equivalent. Yeah, I need to sit down and like figure out how I want to board for this matchup. Like I haven't played it a lot with this build. Like I know how I want to sideboard with my mono white build, but not with this build. So my opponent probably gambled for life from the loam. So hopefully this shuts off what they're doing. If it does, great. So Rest in Peace could have a Crossing Grip on its pointed at it right now. Alright, opponent did not have Crossing Grip, followed by just Grove of the Burn Willows, destroy me. So that's good. Their Crucible of Worlds is not looking great. So I know I can just port this Maze of Ith to get through right now, but I'm just going to play Palace Jailer this turn to start drawing cards. So like all I want to do is draw to a way to get this Magus of the Moon into play, and once we do that, we win. Wasteland actually isn't all that bad here. Wastelanding either the Grove or the Maze of Ith is fine at this point. Nope, we're not doing that right now. I am playing a deck called Death and Taxes. It is a mono-white control deck in Legacy. Most of the control in my deck is stapled to small, sort of annoying creatures. Yeah, it feels good to be the pretty little princess. Especially with this Rest in Peace in play, disrupting my opponent. I have this Wasteland to deal with this Maze of Ith. I'm going to Wasteland the Maze of Ith pretty much no matter what, unless my opponent presented like both pieces of the Dark Depths combo, in which case I would hold it. Sure, you can waste my port. Ooh, crop rotation. Sure. Gay Sock Collector, I do not play any Modern. This channel is almost exclusively Legacy and almost exclusively Death and Taxes, this mono-white control deck that I'm playing right now. Alright. Tabernacle's decent. So I'm going to get to keep 3 of these creatures the next turn. It's going to be difficult for me to like do anything with this sword, so I'm going to go ahead and attack in with everything except 1 mom. Win rate is currently 63%. I do also really hate elves. Yes, that is very accurate. This is really annoying to click through. Yes, that is the same sort of deck that we're talking about. We don't like that deck here at this channel. It's very good against our deck. Curse and Grip the Rest in Peace, sure. Nick, you would love playing against elves. Elves don't do a lot against Blighted Agent. Plateau right on time. Good job, Plateau. Tilt. All right. So we got there. So game 2, we conceded for time. In game 3, we win with Rest in Peace and Jailer to draw us a bunch of cards. All right, so we are currently 3-1 in this league. Things are looking pretty good. So far we have beaten Death and Taxes. We have played against Death and Taxes, Eldrazi, Miracles, and Lands, and our loss there was to Miracles. So we're hoping to make this one a 4-1 and improve on our performance from earlier. Since it seems like I have a bunch of new people in the channel, I just want to introduce myself again. My name is Phil Gallagher. I'm a teacher from Roanoke, Virginia. I teach Latin, and I am a legacy enthusiast. Particularly, I love Death and Taxes, the mono-white control deck that I am playing, and I run a website for it called Thraben University. There's a picture link to it in the stream below. I thank you all for joining me tonight. I've had sort of a lazy day here. I got the day off of school because it's cold in Virginia, and I have a message on my phone that is going to tell me that I either have a delay or I have another day off of work tomorrow. So that will be exciting for me to figure out in a couple of minutes here. So if you're enjoying my legacy content here, feel free to follow the channel. I'm hoping to be streaming a little bit most days this week, sort of in the evenings like I am right now. Hoping to build up the channel a little bit and get to partner status within a month or so. I think that's a somewhat reasonable goal. We'll see how it goes. Otherwise, I'm just going to have a lot of fun streaming D&T. And again, thank you to Mark Wheat. If you are watching, thank you very much. He donated $20 towards the stream and channel. Oh, our league matchmaking has failed. I've been returned to the queue. So again, Mark Wheat, thank you very much for your donation. I really do appreciate it. Thraben University is sort of a labor of love. I'd do it either way, but getting paid to play Magic is pretty sweet. Rockefeller. Alright, I have no data on what my opponent is playing. This is a reasonable 7-card hand. We're going to keep this. It's awkward that our only white source is wastelandable. My opponent thought seizes me. We are on the draw versus Rockefeller. My opponent probably should just take my Ether Vial here, but I don't know what deck they're playing yet, so their decisions might be sort of shaped by their hand. We'll play the Port out this turn. If my opponent is a Wasteland and Thoughtseize deck, I don't want to expose my Plateau to a Wasteland before I've had a chance to at least play one spell with it. So Death and Taxes is one of the sort of tier 1 to tier like 1.5 decks in Modern, depending on where you want to call the classification at any given time. This exact version is one that is based off of lists that 2 of my fellow Death and Taxes players have been working on for some time. It's a combination of Bahra's and Ayati's lists. Batra still streams sometimes, um, but it's been less frequent as of late. He is of the opinion that Death and Taxes is not particularly good right now, so he has been playing less than he normally would. I would expect that if he has any major event that he'd be gearing up for, he would be playing more. So it's sort of yet to be determined if our opponent is actually playing check pile or if they are just playing some other bug mid-rangey deck. But either way, this Batterskull is going to be pretty sweet unless it just dies. Yeah, their lightning bolt's a little bit late there. So to play this Mother of Runes without using Cavern to see if we can get them to use a counterspell on it. Nope. We are going to put this on human, and I know that might seem a little weird given that we have 2 Flicker Wisps in our hand, but hear me out. My opponent has no basic lands right now. So we are going to Recruiter of the Guard, which is uncounterable, and go get a Magus of the Moon, which will also be uncounterable. So we are essentially giving our opponent notice that they're dead. They need to play something like a Deathrite Shaman this turn, or alternatively remove the Mother of Runes this turn and have another removal spell that can deal with Magus. So since we have some new people in the stream who might not be... Ooh, a Wasteland! Why did they not Wasteland the Cavern? What are you doing, opponent? Alright, that was a good call against command. So the opponent is essentially, you know, saying, I have a Fatal Push or equivalent. We'll see if they actually do. If they don't, they probably would have held up that Culligan's command and floated the mana for it. But you don't put Magus of the Moon in your deck to not go for the Magus of the Moon auto-win. Maybe they don't realize Magus of the Moon is a human, and I just get him here. Oh, yep. They could just have a Lightning Bolt too, and just Lightning Bolt this Magus. It might not be absolute game over. Alright, my opponent has conceded to Magus of the Moon, because Magus of the Moon is a fair and balanced magic card. Good job, Magus. Yeah, I would also be surprised if they had a second Bolt. So since our opponent is an opposing control deck, we try to do things that are going to mess with their controlling elements while sort of supporting our own game. So we're going to bring in some land disruption, some things to shut off their graveyard, and start with that. We'll start by boarding out all of our Swords to Plowshares. The card's not particularly good in this matchup. And then after that, we have some choices. I usually trim the Palace Jailer. It's great when it's great, but it's very, very bad when your opponent gets the crown and they are an opposing control deck. So I like to cut that against most control decks when I have enough cards to. After that, Phyrexian Revoker is a little bit unreliable as a creature, as both an artifact and a creature. It's vulnerable to both sides of Culligan's command, so it's not particularly good. I sometimes leave one in the deck as a tutor target. I disagree. I really dislike Palace Jailer when my opponent plays Snapcaster Mage. Like, the same thing can happen that happens to you when you're playing against Miracles, where they just get the crown and the game is over. I pull Palace Jailer in this matchup. And yeah, I'm going to cut a Flicker Wisp. I don't think Jitte is great in the matchup, but since my opponent has Culligan's command and some number of my pieces of equipment are going to die, I like to have 3 things to search up with Stone Forges. The games are going to go long, and I don't want to get 0 value out of the Stone Forges. This sounds fun. Like, it has a Vial, it has a Stone Forge, it has Recruiter to get a big bomb of some nature. To be fair, most of our creatures are bad against Strix. The ones that don't have First Strike or Double Strike are just bad against Strix. Search for Azcanta, good magic card is good. Magus plan again? Yeah, we are likely on the Magus plan. We could start porting our opponent, but I'm going to get a little aggressive with my creatures since, like, I have a really nice Vial curve. I'm going to make them answer this Stoneforge on their turn. And if they answer the Stoneforge, then I'm going to get an unchecked Mom, which is pretty good for me, because Mom plus Magus is a hard lock. So our opponent likes their card. So my opponent even fetched a non-basic. They are just not respecting the Magus, or don't have the ability to respect it with their build. Sorry, let me mute my phone here. I can either Stoneforge and try to dump the equipment in play, or just go for the Turbo Recruiter and Blood Moon U plan, and just make them have a counterspell for it. Both are good plans. Yeah, opponent probably has no basics since they have the Wastelands. I lean towards that conclusion as well. Let's at least throw the threat of the Magus out there. This will mean that the opponent can never, like, tap out again unless they have a counterspell. Alright, so they pitch a Brainstorm to counter the Magus. That's fine. Or the Recruiter, which would have gotten Magus. My opponent pitched a Deathrite? They're so scared of Magus that they'll counter Recruiter, but they won't put a Deathrite into play? That seems loose. Alright, they got all the best cards from my hand. We are left with a weak hand. But not that weak. So we get a second Mom, so our creatures are unlikely to die. And we get a Jitte, so we can put the Jitte on one of the Moms and start attacking. So my opponent is going to flip this Search for Escanta, which is going to be problematic. Drawing a Wasteland would be great, drawing a Cataclysm would be great, a Magus would be great, my opponent having a Jace or equivalent would be bad. Alright, Snapcaster Mage Culligan's command is rough. So our opponent will get our Jitte and blow up and make us discard our Batterskull. Yep. So we're both hellbent, but my opponent has a Search for Escanta. So effectively, that puts them pretty far ahead. I'm going to tap the Search for Escanta rather than one of their other lands, so that if they want to use it, they have to use it now. Oh, jeez. They got a Toxic Deluge, chat. That gets both of these Moms, and likely whatever else I play in the following turns. Wow, my opponent is just going to go for the Deluge here instead of holding out. That I do accept. Magus of the Moon. I can still get Cataclysm. So I'm not going to flip the Azcanta back over because my opponent can flip it right back. And if I flip that over for them, they essentially just get a free scry. Yeah, I don't think my opponent is a particularly experienced player, if I were to guess. This Escanta will probably take over this game for them. I have plenty of live draws, especially Magus. But if I whiff on draws for a few turns, I'm very likely to lose. That's an Abrupt Decay, which my opponent will probably just snap off at this Flicker Wisp without any thought whatsoever. Yeah. The good news is that if I ever draw a Magus, my opponent will just die to it. So I'll actually port my opponent's only red source here, I think. Jace the Mind Sculptor. Fantastic. I'm going to wait to play this Thalia, even though it could potentially deny them a mana, because I would like to flash it in at their end step, because hopefully they will just do something I don't care about, like Ponder or Brainstorm. Oh, shoot, I just clicked through that. Guess I won't tick up. Alright. That was a happy little accident, chat. Happy little accident. We now did not expose that Thalia to a removal spell. I recently removed a stop on my opponent's second main phase that I had set before. So if I Violin this Thalia now, my opponent can still Jace, so I'm not going to put the Thalia in. Just throwing it out there that Magus of the Moon would still be a great draw. I will leave this Violet too. It's likely that we'll play the whole I bounce Thalia back and forth for a whole bunch of turns. And we'll head at Jace. Yeah, Search and Jace is rough. My opponent will likely get another red source here. So now I can't port them off of red. Lightning Bolt targeting Mom. Okay. Again, since I can't take them off of a color, I will just hit that now. They'll probably use it. I'll be sad. You know, not even Magus. Like, I'd settle for a call against command. That's good. Alright, my opponent is starting to fate seal me. Put it on the bottom, that's great. Oh, well, that's not good. We're pretty dead this game, chat. Cataclysm is what we're really hoping for. Cataclysm would be really good. But save Cataclysm, we don't have a lot of outs here. This Culligan's command will also destroy me. But I don't know that my opponent will know that they need to, like, plus the Lily, target Thalia, I try to bounce the Thalia, and then in response they K-command me to get it. They might not know that. Great, all they found was a brainstorm. Just a brainstorm. Alright, they figured it out. Maybe not. Well, they figured it out. They were brainstorming every turn anyway. No biggie. So our hope is that our opponent bottoms some cards. Yep, and we draw a Cataclysm. Cataclysm one-time dealer. Yeah, Bahra is streaming Cube, though, unless he has changed. He popped in the chat for a little while. He decided he didn't want to try to stream D&T while I was streaming it, you know. Don't need to compete with each other on that front. If my opponent puts on top, I will shuffle with Windswept Heath. Yes, technically Fate Seal defense, but this game is slipping away quickly. We are likely on Cataclysm or Pia and Kieran or Bust. Our opponent also has 4 cards in hand, so there's a non-zero chance that they have a counterspell. I mean, slipping away might be putting it a little lightly. One way or another, I will probably play this game out to completion, like until my opponent like actually factually kills me, just for clock reasons. I'm ahead by about 3 minutes on clock, and that is something that could matter in this matchup. Like, I can sandbag the land to make them think that I have... Why? What could you possibly want to get back? Snapcaster Mage. Yeah, I guess you have Snapcaster Mage Force of Will now. Sure. I guess Jace... Does Jace emblem before Lily? I can't beat either one of those emblems. They're just gonna Snapcaster Mage Culligan's command away my draw. So is that what's happening? Yep, that's what's happening. So Disgruntled Elk, that's a good point. I could just keep it to play it after Cataclysm if I draw it. I was thinking about playing around Liliana of the Veil in addition. And now they're getting back a Deathray Shaman. You bet. Oh, we're so dead. So when you look at Check Pile, it doesn't really necessarily look like a good deck because it's kind of an assortment of cards that like maybe work together and get a decent amount of value. But then you have games like this where like you draw your pieces in the right combinations at the right times, and the deck looks unbeatable. If our opponent puts us on top, we're probably dead. If they bottom it, they put it on top, we're probably dead. Yes, way to look at the bright side. They could have Liliana of the Veil, too. Oh no, they're just gonna... Oh. They still have another K command in there? Why would you cast that targeting Force of Will right now? Why not just wait till I put something on the stack? Like, that's such a bad play if I have, like, an uncounterable creature as my draw. Or did they know what was... No, they put it on top, so they knew what it was. Sure, that's fair, but, like, it's a poor use of a Snapcaster. Just wait till I cast it. Or just, like, don't care about it at all as well. We'll show them. Now we'll cast the rest in peace. So, in case you aren't aware, I am very, very dead. I'm just doing some things that will cost my opponent some seconds. We're now 4 to 5 minutes ahead on clock. Alright. So we lost game 2 to Jace Ultimate. That's the thing that killed us, but really, the 4th K command was rough. Or I guess it was, yeah, 4 K commands. Because it got Snapcastered back twice. I guess if we know our opponent has Lily of the Veil as well as Jace, there is an argument for bringing in Revoker 2 as well. But we're really hoping to get the Planeswalkers off the board with Cataclysm. I guess I could board out another Flicker Wisp for the Revoker. That's not the worst. Like, Flicker Wisp was really bad against Baleful Strix. Our Vials frequently get killed, so it's hard to get like the Flicker Wisp ultimate value off of them. And there's not really anything we want to be blinking on their side most of the time. Alright, we have a 1-land Ether Vial hand with 2 pieces of equipment that I can do nothing with. The Recruiter can get the Magus, but that's a turn 5 Magus, and in the meantime I haven't done anything. Ayati snap keep. Chat says keep. I don't know about that. I will draw lands. I don't know, if my opponent gets to K command this Vial on 3 and I don't do anything, that's really bad. I am just dead. Just kind of watching the chat opinions here on this hand. I think this is a mulligan. Chat's pretty torn. Like, but this isn't an action-heavy hand. Like, these cards do nothing unless I draw a Stoneforge and a land. Like, if I draw another land, this hand still doesn't do anything. This is pretty bad. I'm gonna ship this one. Like, I like this hand much better. Like, this doesn't have any immediate action, but Rest in Peace is really good long-term value versus that deck. I'll put the Cavern on the bottom, I won't guess. Yeah, Hopkins, that's how I looked at that previous hand. It's like a 5-card hand where I die to a Culligan's Command or an Abrupt Decay if my opponent has it. That doesn't sound like where I want to be in this matchup. Oh, hello, friend. So the real question is, do I just jam this Magus if my opponent doesn't do anything? I think I'll wait for this Magus to come off a vial and cast the sword. I think one land vial hands very frequently lose you the game. I don't like keeping those against decks that you know your opponent has many answers to vial. It's not just one either. Like, it's Abrupt Decay, it's K Command. Don't like that. Like, if it was a stronger one land hand, I would have kept it. But I don't think that was a strong one land hand. Oh, that's rough. Unfortunately, our draws this game have been a little suboptimal. Like, drawing both Sword of Fire and Ice and Batterskull is a touch rough. And, like, that's sort of for a similar reason why we mulled that previous hand. So now we'll say always no to that one. For the sake of speed, I will play this Stoneforge into an opposing counterspell. I don't want to just get hemmed and lose both Stoneforge and the Batterskull. Like, if I get hemmed now, I lose 2 pieces of equipment, but I still have a body that I can do something with for Sword of Fire and Ice. Sure, you can have a Baleful Strix. So I can equip the Stoneforge and start getting in there, but if I do so, my opponent's going to start drawing cards with Leovold, so I think I'm just going to start by putting this Batterskull into play. Drawing yet another vial. Good, solid top decks on my end. Ah, yes, Deathrite Shaman. Every stream seems to come back to that card. I wonder what that means. Card must be good or something. No, Tassiger is bananas. I'm gonna go ahead and put this Thalia in now. It might mess with anything my opponent wants to do. Like, it will stop them from playing a 2-mana thing like an Abrupt Decay and ruining my combat. Oh yeah, we are going for the gusto here. We are going for the kill shot. Lightning Bolt the Thalia, you bet. So this turn I do have the option of just shooting my own Germ token and leaving them at 8, and then the next connection will still kill them. Or do I just put them to 6? If I put them to 6 and I later need to move the sword over to the Stoneforge, then that's only 5 damage. So that won't kill them, but it'll kill them if they fetch again? I sort of like not giving them the card, because we have the 8 damage on the follow-up turn if they don't have an answer to this Germ, and the answer can't be Jace. So it can be a... Like, shooting them doesn't change the clock. I'm gonna shoot my Germ. It's a spicy line. So they'll get plenty of looks for something if they tap the Azcanta, but then they might not have mana to actually do anything meaningful. Alright, let's make them have it. If they are looking for Search for Azcanta, that Call Against command is not going to do them a lot of good. And we'll shoot them for the win. They can draw a card here all they want. If he deluges here for 6, I think we're in good shape. I agree with your assessment there. Alright. So we won that one. Game 3, we win with Batterskull and Sword of Fire and Ice, essentially. Alright, so let's get a quick summary of what's going on here, chat, after I update the logs here. Again, here's the deck list. We are currently sitting at a 64% win percentage. We're 65 and 37. We're at 102 matches. I'm pretty happy with the build. Again, the build is sort of a hybrid between Ayati's build and Bahara's build. I've been pretty happy with it so far. The main deck, Rest in Peace, is a little bit questionable. I've been pretty happy with it so far. Otherwise, I like most of the deck building decisions that I've got going on here. I'm going to take 30 seconds to check my message and see if school is closed tomorrow or if school is delayed tomorrow. And if school is closed, then I'm going to keep streaming. What does Roanoke County Public Schools have to tell me? All right, two-hour delay tomorrow. Not a cancellation. So I'm gonna go ahead and call it for a night. I feel like Baja's build was basically my build since we put it together for a stream I joined him on. Okay. His build was a few cards different from yours, but they were very, very similar. You know, most of the red-white builds are cut from approximately the same cloth. What have we seen most in the leagues so far? Curious about the meta you've got going in leagues. I've seen the most Eldrazi, Bug Delver, Check Pile, Big Eldrazi, Grixis Delver, Miracles, D&T, Burn, and Lands. That's the short list for matches since the tail end of December with the red-white build. Hey, I'm going to a Legacy event on Sunday with mono-white D&T. What's a good sideboard against lands? If you're playing sort of a Crusader build like I am, I bring in the Rest in Peace and the Surgicals to deal with their graveyard elements. I bring in Sword of War and Peace over Jitte as another pro-red thing. And if they're loaming, whacking them for 7+ with Sword of War and Peace is pretty disgusting. And Sanctum Prelate comes in as well. It's a generically pretty good card that can shut off both Loam and Punishing Fire on 2, and Path is fine as well. As far as things that you can take out, you can really trim on Mirran Crusader. Well, while it's a great card with equipment on its own in the matchup, it just dies to Punishing Fire, which is not fantastic. So I would start by trimming or maybe even cutting all of the Mirran Crusaders, and you can probably go down or cut Revokers. If you see your opponent is playing Molten Vortex, then you probably want to keep some amount of the Revokers, but just stopping Mox Diamond is not necessarily worth a card in the grand scheme of things. Win rate, I thought I said 64. Yeah, so we're probably at like 64.5% or somewhere thereabouts. It's not quite enough to round up to 65. I forgot to type in one of my like last loss categories before, so I just counted 1 win and 1 loss there when I did that last data roundup. Yeah, so Disgruntled Elk, there's a lot of Eldrazi online. It's really popular, and I don't mean just regular Eldrazi, I mean big Eldrazi as well. Let me look at those numbers again. So I have played against regular Eldrazi 5 times. And I have played against big Eldrazi 5 times as well. So in like my 100 matches, 10% of it was Eldrazi. Yeah, I think Cataclysm is good against lands. I'm a little unsure about how I want to sideboard for the lands matchup with the red-white build. That's something I need to like really sit down and think about, because I have a lot of really good cards for the matchup. And like I think Cataclysm is good. Atai was saying that he wasn't so hot on it. But like, if you can Cataclysm with a Rest in Peace in play, the game is over. Like, that is just, you know, absolutely the most crippling combination of things that you can do to them. If I played Moto, I'd be jamming 3 Blood Moons and 3 Relics into all of my Goblin boards. Yep, sure, absolutely. I think Red Prison is a very fine deck choice on Moto for similar reasons. All right, everyone, we managed to get in three leagues today on my my nice day off here. So I thank you all for joining me for them. I will probably be streaming again tomorrow night at somewhere around 7 or 8 o'clock. So thank you for joining me, and good night. And if you liked what you saw today, please follow the stream.